That a few years later, and he went down to Kilnaleck, where his brother Charlie died a few years ago and where the family still live. He was friendly to all Irish who went, and the Irish made a big impression in Montana, mainly with the advice and the help and the assistance, financial and otherwise, of Marcus Daly, a very, very kind man indeed. One of them was Tom Cruise, who made a lot of money and came back home to Ireland with it, but unfortunately went back on the pretext that he was needed to sign some documents. He was involved with a crooked solicitor, and poor Tom Cruise lost his fortune by signing in the wrong spot. He had two associates in the mining industry and everything he'd done. One was William A. Clark, and the other was Augustus Hines, both of them, and they acted as a trio for a long time. When elections to the United States Senate and Congress came along, he opposed Clark. He didn't want bribery. He retired, and there he was, but he went again in a few years and still got elected. $9 million for his ownership of the mines, and not alone that, but he remained on as president. So he was still drawing huge dividends out of the mines, and he had $39 million in his back pocket. Huge funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, and he was buried and is still there in the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, where his wife is also buried. But she lived to be 88 before she died. So she died, and she left a fortune of $14 million. Now, to think about Marcus Daly and what he did, at 15 years of age, he arrives in New York. He goes through the quarantine at Ellis Island. He is just a slip of a boy. And 5 years later, he has enough money to take that ship and go to California. He had enough wit and sense and know-how to go to Nevada records, because on his death, his personal papers were taken out to a farm outside, a ranch outside Butte, and all was burned. And later on, even his personal letters between Margaret and himself were also burned by Margaret, and for what reason we simply do not know. But the fact of the matter is that he is one of the most famous Irishmen ever to go to the United States. And if the famine, and I call it a famine just now for a moment, was the cause of all this emigration, all this death, all this worry, it certainly, Ireland's loss was America's gain. And in the end, it was Ireland's gain, because so many Irish went to America. There were so many envelopes sent home with a few dollars that did so well in so many areas, and it come to a zenith in 1961 with a visit here of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which will be never forgotten in this country or further afield. Always will be a man who we hold in the highest regard. To go back to the famine or the Great Hunger, I always cringe a bit when I hear it called a famine, because there was no famine. There was no famine, plenty of food. Every year of the famine, there were tons, hundreds of tons of food exported from this country. And I recently saw a ship's manifest from Limerick City on the 23rd of December 1847, at the very depth of the famine, and that ship was going to London. The Turks loaded a ship in mass graves because there wasn't enough coffins, there wasn't enough shrouds, so they dug huge graves and put them in. The cholera hit again then in a very bad way, and cholera was a disease where you take it off the corpses. Many of the men who bury the dead were dead themselves in a few days, and the men finished up by taking off all their clothes and going in their skins to bury the dead, and then washing the clothes afterwards and hoping it would work. In some places it didn't, and in some places it did. So that's a potted history of Miles Daly and a potted history of the Great Hunger in Ireland. It's a sad story, but a total history of Marcus Daly rather will take longer than we have tonight. But he's a man widely admired. In personality, he was quietly spoken, as far as we know. He spoke until the day he died with an Irish brogue. He listened intently to what we said to him, and obviously he remembered it and acted upon it. He was a headline for many Irish people who went afterwards, because they said, Miles Daly made it, we have a chance. And the hundreds and hundreds of Irishmen who went to Montana that time and found a living and found a welcome among the people of Montana they often thanked him, and there are large memorials to Marcus Daly in both New York and in Montana. And out in the parish church of Crossallaw, there was a large cross there, and that cross was erected by Marcus Daly in memory of his own family at home. We think there was a reconciliation between himself and his wife, because she is buried beside him in Brooklyn, so something happened to marry them up again, but the earlier days are clouded by the fact that those letters were burned. He also sang an Irish song, he danced an Irish dance, he drank a little drop of whiskey now and then, so he was an ordinary common man in many ways, but he never ever forgot his roots in Ireland, and never did, and I hope that we in Ireland never forget Marcus Daly. Thank you. Just to finish up, I started with a short story with an American touch to it. I'll tell you another one now to finish up, and this is a train story. We have no trains in Callan now. I've told this a few times here, and the people will know what I'm talking about. This is a train going from Dublin to Cork after it was an excursion train for a shopping trip, leaving at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The train is filling up at Euston Station, and a big, powerful woman comes in laden with parcels, and she had a little dog in a basket on her arm as well, and behind her came her little husband, 5'7". So they walked down the carriage looking for a seat, and they came for a double seat, vacant. She sat in the inner seat herself. She put the parcels down on the ground and up on the rack, and she put the little dog in the basket on the seat beside her in the aisle seat. So her husband went to move the basket in and sat down, and she said, "Get away, John. Fifi wants that seat to Cork. It's a long journey to Cork, you know. You'll be quite tired by the time we get to Cork, so go away and get a seat for yourself." So poor John went down the carriage, could find nothing, and had to catch the overhead bar, and he stood there. The train was just about to move when a big, tall, powerfully built American came into the carriage, walked slowly down, looking from side to side for a seat. He sees the basket and the dog and says, "Man, move the dog. I want to sit down." "Get away," she said. "You can't have that. I told my husband that seat is for Fifi. Fifi must have it, so go and get a seat for yourself." "Ma'am," he said, "I got a ticket. The dog ain't. Now move the dog." "I told you I am not moving the dog." "Well," he said, "it's easy to solve this." So he reached over, he opened the window of the train, picked up basket and dog, and threw all out on the tracks. Well, she went berserk. She just went berserk. She screeched and she shouted at the American, and finally she thought of her husband. "John, come up here, you useless fool, come up and do something." So up comes John, drew himself up to his full 5'7" and says, "You Americans are all wrong. You live on the wrong side of the Atlantic. You drive on the wrong side of the road. You hold the fork in the wrong hand, and you throw the wrong bitch out the window."
The Holy Cross Church in Tramore, approaching the old graveyard. Reilly, the cameraman, and I just arrived, and this is my good friend Andy Taylor of Tramore, the Tramore historian, who did so much work on my behalf in trying to find information and records about my grandfather's Sullivan family and McCarthy family. My grandfather's father.
Okay.
My grandfather's ancestors are buried here. My grandfather was born here. His ancestors are the Sullivans, of course. He was James Sullivan, and his mother's maiden name was McCarthy. And Andy put a lot of effort into finding various records on both the Sullivans and the McCarthys and their life here in the Tremor area. We will hear a bit later have a look at a plaque that I arranged through Andy to have made and remembers the McCarthys and the Sullivans, those that are buried here. As in so many of the early burials, there are no gravestones for our Sullivans or McCarthys. They are buried in unmarked graves, and so all we have is the plaque mounted on the wall in their memory. Got some sunlight on it, that helps, right? Can you read the Irish, Jerry?
Oh yeah. Our J is J.
It's a nice church, Jerry.
Andy, could you
No, you just tell me
with me in it?
what to
It's
do.
just this button.
Just press this fella.
Yep.
Yep.
And you can ever see it in that. Well, you can look on the screen. There should be a.
Oh yes, yeah. Okay. They're newer houses like that. There were two older ones, and all even the ones going up. They were all changed.
Yeah. No, when I was here in '82, they were the old houses, and then they put this facade on.
I had to put a facade on front of them. That's correct.
Yes, yeah. And they were just sort of ordinary grey.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Grey, yeah. I'll read it to the folks. Okay? Here is the plaque in memory of my Sullivan and McCarthy ancestors, and it reads, "In blessed memory of my ancestors buried here, great-grandparents Timothy Sullivan, Peter Street, 1845, 1892, and wife Mary McCarthy, 1846 to 1905, their parents, Florence O'Sullivan, 1800 to 1870, and wife of Carragavantry, Jeremiah McCarthy, born 1810, and wife Mary Keith. You might not just keep it on me, just show it to the thing as well, of Knockendorf and Peter Street, and placed by James P. Lynch, Falls Church, Virginia, USA, with the Irish expression,
Yes, they correct.
well, in English,
Which means may they be on the right hand side of God.
the Irish expression saying, may they be on the right-hand side of God.
The church inside,
What?
are you going in to see the font?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, I assume that. The cars are still there. knob of a hill up there, and that's where it got its title. Like, you know.
Where's,
A carrigavantry is a very unusual one. It means carrig
There's a rock, yeah.
Frontiora is the quernstone maker, not the millstone that they make quernstones with out in that area. So they called it after that. Frontiora.
Just stay there, Jim, in that position. 2 years now, that's a good picture there.
The official name was Carrigavrantry. There was an R there, and they softened it by calling it Carrigavrantry. Now, if we were to take it as being Carrigavrantry, it would be the Rock of the Widow, Point Rock. But the R in it makes it Frontiora, which is a quernstone maker.
What is a quernstone?
Quernstone, you know the millstone that they for grinding corn and that.
Oh,
like,
yes,
you know,
yes.
that's where the particular type of rock
Yeah.
and stuff was in abundance out in that area. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
we would call it a grinding wheel.
yeah, exactly. That's it.
The Sullivans and McCarthy's originally came from townlands, 2 townlands over, just on the periphery of the city limits of Tremor, the townland of Knockendorf and the townland of Carrigavrantry. If we were to go there, we would see that these townlands are now, there is now encroachment of development, particularly on Knockendorf, is it not? Yes, yes. It's almost like a blight coming up the hill into the townland of homes. And so I would imagine 10 years from now, there would be little left in the way of agricultural land and opened farmland and grassland.
Yeah,
in those,
Tremor
in
is
those
closing in very quickly on it now, like, you know.
areas. Already.
Oh yeah, if you won't go up that way now, we were going home, I'll bring you up there. When you see the difference, you know, it was the last time you were here.
It was just on the edge.
Yeah,
when
now it's slightly different.
was there, which was kind of disappointing. When in '82 there was nothing there when I
Yeah,
came,
yeah.
but I didn't know that was where the townlands were. There was nothing back here except land, and now it's all sort of red tiled roof.
This was actually, these houses were the end of it up in the 1950s.
Oh, these 2
There was
houses.
nothing else after that except the townlands of Knockendorf and Carrigavrantry.
Well, it's happening all over Ireland. The encroachment of
Pretty Reverend Nicholas Field.
That's a seashell.
That's the font above on the left. You see it facing you, not at the very back of the candlesticks
see
there.
it.
Yeah. I'll walk up this way.
That's the baptismal font used when my grandfather, James Sullivan, was baptized here in 1880, and I presume used for all the Sullivan and McCarthy families.
I did that. It was down at where the reservation was at the end of the church below. That's where it was then.
Okay.
And they shifted then into the soil place there in the 1960s. And they brought it back over here. There's a child after being baptized today. And
Still wet from the previous baptism.
it is this morning. Yeah.
It's a nice church. Beautiful stained glass.
Yeah, did I give you a photograph, Jim, of the church as it was before they redone it?
think so.
But I'll give you one that's, if I can't find it over now, I'll send it on to you. Yeah, like, you know, but it's completely changed now.
I have a. This is their Christian brothers of
Or Dill Saller, they're a different order, yeah.
kind of different.
They
That's
were
what- that's
together
why,
one
yeah.
time, and there was a split. In actual fact, I think there was over the crest. I think they still use the part of the De La Salle crest in the Irish Christian Brothers. That was the founder of the order in Ignatius Rise.
I just had one here. You see the water still on. When I was here in,
Yeah, and there was a huge big thing over when it was down below that they used to pull down like a cover, used to come down and done like a church. And they'd rise it up then on the things, the two big balls that were holding the levels on it to take it back up.
when I was here.
And there was a
in,
big pulpit there, the pulpit was there. Huge.
Yeah, what
done
happened?
the shame.
What did they
There's a
do?
pulpit there. Broke it up. So the last place I saw it was down the old railway station.
But when did they take it?
In 1964, when after there's all these changes. It was desecration, really, like, you know, what they did.
When I was here in '82, my first visit, I came. It was Sunday morning when I arrived here from Cabin, and Mass was underway. I came in, attended Mass. After Mass, I went back to the sacristy. Where's the sacristy? Okay, yeah. Went back to the sacristy. To the, I think his name was Cunningham. Was there a father?
Matthew Cunningham, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
Father.
retired now, he's still alive.
Father Cunningham, and told him about what I was about in terms of ancestral interests in my Sullivans. And he then went and got the big book of baptism for that period of time, 1880. And sure enough, there was the entry for James J. Sullivan, born to Timothy Sullivan and Mary McCarthy in February 1880. And so that sort of cemented the fact that this was his church.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
No, this is no Reilly. Bill O'Reilly.
Wow.
He'd be on the States on Fox News.
Oh, yeah,
Fox.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
He has
he's
a book.
controversial.
Oh, he's good though, like, you know.
He's
A
controversial.
fellow sent me this last book he got, like, you know. That was brilliant. Yeah. But you see, his people are from Callan, I think, aren't they? Of course, O'Reilly is.
Beautiful church, I mean, there's no question about it. There's the houses and the Sullivans. I don't know. They were in there for a bit. My grandfather was born and raised in that corner house. That's on Peter Street.
Peter Street.
Peter Street. And he left in 1899. So he was 19 years old when he left that house to go to America. He left behind his mother and his sister. His sister Margaret. Margaret was scheduled to go to, or planned to go to America
at about that time as well, but was rejected by U.S. Customs because of some sort of a skin disease. So she had to stay behind. My grandfather had several brothers and other sisters, all of whom went on to America, except Margaret.
There now, you know, that's where the bakery was, the shop was there.
Well, my grandfather worked in a bakery when he was in Tremor before he left for America, and made wonderful bread as a result of it. And I always assumed that it was this bakery that was there when I came in '82 was the same bakery that he...
O'Connor's weren't there, wouldn't have been there at that time. I'd say where he worked was O'Brien's Model Bakeries. They were a big bakery, were down the main street.
Down the main street.
I'd say that's where Lodges was another one, but they wouldn't have been there at that time. But certainly I'd say it was O'Brien's Model Bakeries. They were big bakeries, Crowden Waterford. They're now gone as well. Down near the Strand, they got the store and rebuilt it. It turns in fairly well. And that's across by the church was only in 1864. The Oblates had their first mission here, and they built that church here then. And dropped that crosses in as a memorial to the very first mission.
Sunlight hitting the peninsula there, Joe.